Right. So this time, we're going deep into a real head-scratcher. We're going to Portlock, Alaska,
Oh, yeah.
a town that basically just disappeared, poof, back in the 1940s.
Wow.
You've given us a ton of stuff on this one.
Yeah.
First-hand accounts, historical records, even some footage from a reality TV show that tried to figure it all out. It's got all the classic ghost town, elements.
Right.
But what's really got me is like the fear that seems to have driven everyone away.
Well, what's really interesting is that even before, like, the town of Portlock even existed, the Native Alitic people, they already had a certain mystique about this area.
Yeah.
They had a connection to the Kenai Peninsula going back centuries.
Right.
And their history is full of stories about spirits and creatures.
Yeah, it wasn't just storytelling, was it? It was like these tales were really like woven into their lives.
Yeah.
It's almost like a guidebook to surviving the beauty and the danger of this landscape.
Absolutely. It's a way of making sense of the unexplainable, making sense of the unpredictable. And one of the figures that pops up in their lore is the Nantinaq.
Okay.
Often described as a monstrous, hairy humanoid with a taste for human flesh.
Oh, okay. The hairs on the back of my neck are already standing up. Just imagine living in that environment with those stories, like echoing in your head.
Right.
Like every shadow, every rustle of leaves could be the Nantinaq.
Absolutely. It paints a very chilling picture. And this pre-existing unease, I think, laid the groundwork for the fear that would grip Portlock later. Because when settlers began arriving in the early 1900s,
Right.
drawn by the promise of the Alaskan frontier, they were stepping into a place already kind of steeped in these unsettling tales.
Yeah, and it wasn't like any old piece of land. It was the Kenai Peninsula,
Right.
a place that was, notorious for its rugged beauty,
Yes.
its unforgiving weather, and its isolation.
Absolutely.
Portlock itself was, carved out of this wilderness.
Yeah. Only accessible by boat for a good chunk of the year.
It was a place where you were constantly reminded of the power of nature, of how quickly things could change,
Right.
and that isolation, that being on the edge of the known world. It definitely played a role in the town's story.
So we've got this remote town carved out of this Alaskan wilderness, a place already kind of shrouded in these unsettling native stories. And then you get these settlers, many of them are Russian Alatic,
Right.
seeking their fortune in these canneries, sawmills, and mines. You can almost feel the tension. Can't-
Absolutely. You have this clash of cultures, this clash of worldviews, the settlers driven by economic ambitions, maybe a little less attuned to the warnings of the land.
Right.
And then, there were whispers and strange occurrences that started plaguing the town, like right from the get-go.
Yeah, there was that story about the cannery workers. They left for like a whole year.
Because of mysterious disturbances. What do you think about that? I mean, it must have been something pretty serious to make them just abandon, like, their whole livelihood.
Yeah. It really raises some questions, doesn't it? Like, what were these disturbances? Were they rooted in, like, the natural world, the realities of living in the Kenai Peninsula? Or was there something a little more unsettling going on?
I guess we got to dig a little deeper to find that out. But as the town grew, these events, they seem to, like, escalate.
Right.
We're talking about people disappearing, hunters, loggers, miners going out of the woods and never coming back. And then the discovery of, like, mutilated bodies.
Oh, those deaths were gruesome. Limbs torn off, chests ripped open, injuries that just didn't match any known predator. So you can imagine the fear that started to grip the town.
Yeah, it's like something straight out of a horror movie.
Yeah.
And it's at this point, right, that the old Alutiiq legends, the stories of the Nantinaq,
Right.
they must have taken on a whole new meaning.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, was this creature responsible for, the disappearances, the brutality of these deaths?
It's a chilling thought. And the fact that many of these settlers were of Russian Alutiiq descent, they probably knew these stories from their own heritage.
Right.
It must have added a whole other layer of fear. It's like the past was coming back to haunt them.
Let's get into some of those accounts.
Okay.
There's a story of Andrew Kamluk, a logger, who was found dead in 1931. His death was apparently caused by logging equipment, but it was so heavy, no single man could have lifted it.
Right.
It's one of those details that just sticks with you.
Yeah.
And then there's Albert Petka. He actually survived an attack long enough to describe a large, hairy creature,
Wow.
unlike any bear he'd ever seen. But then, tragically, he succumbed to his injuries shortly after. Each one of these accounts just kind of adds another piece to the puzzle. And then you have these, like, truly eerie details, like, you know, that moose carcass that was carried away by something much stronger than a bear, leaving behind only these enormous human-like tracks.
Wow.
And then you've got reports of trees being uprooted and replanted upside down.
It's like someone or something was intentionally trying to unsettle the residents.
Right.
And then there's this chilling image of a woman in a black dress. She's seen wailing on the cliffs overlooking the town.
Wow.
Almost like a spectral presence.
Right.
Adding to the growing sense of dread.
Sounds like the town was being haunted on multiple fronts by both physical and maybe spectral forces.
Right.
And then, of course, you have Melania Kell, considered the oldest living resident of Portlock.
Yeah.
Her accounts of this Nantinaq terrorizing the town are pretty vivid and terrifying.
She paints a picture of a creature that isn't just, like, powerful but intelligent, almost malevolent.
Right.
You know, her story suggests that it was deliberately targeting the town.
Right.
Playing on the fears of its inhabitants.
But this is where things get interesting. Some folks suggest that Melania's stories, while they're compelling, may have been more about deterring outsiders.
Right.
And protecting the town's secrets than actual events.
That's a fascinating angle, isn't it? Was she, like, a keeper of the town's history, using folklore to guard its mysteries?
Yeah.
Or was she a victim of that same fear that gripped everyone else? You know, her memory shaped by these unsettling events that she witnessed.
It's almost as if the legend itself was a way to control the narrative, keep people away from this place that held too many secrets.
It's a possibility that adds a whole other layer of complexity to this already really intriguing story.
Right.
And speaking of trying to separate fact from fiction,
let's
talk about that reality show, Alaskan Killer Bigfoot. They went into Portlock with all the latest technology, determined to find some concrete evidence of this Nantinaq.
Did they succeed? Did they find that smoking gun, so to speak, that would prove the creature exists?
Well, the answer's a little more complicated than just, like, a yes or a no. Like, they didn't come back with, like, definitive proof.
Right.
But what they did experience was a series of unsettling events, strange sounds, unexplained movements, and this persistent feeling of being watched.
So no, like, hard proof, but enough to, you know, keep the mystery going.
Right.
And that's what I think is so captivating about Portlock. It's like this place where reality and folklore just kind of blend together.
Right.
The line between what we can explain and what's unexplained is it's blurry.
Yeah, you know, what strikes me is that, like, the show's experience, even without that hard proof, it kind of shows the power of suggestion.
Right.
You go into a place expecting to be scared, expecting to find something supernatural, and you're going to interpret things that way.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder how much of the fear that, you know, that was all over Portlock was a product of, you know, actual threats, and how much of it was just amplified by the stories, by what people expected.
It's the chicken or the egg, isn't it? Did the fear create the monster, or did the monster create the fear?
Right.
But maybe focusing only on the Nantinaq, on the supernatural explanations, maybe that's blinding us to other things that contributed to, you know, Portlock just disappearing.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What else could have happened?
Well, let's think about, like, the history.
Okay.
In the 1940s, they built the Alaska Route 1 highway.
Right.
And it opened up the Kenai Peninsula like never before. But, and here's the thing, it bypassed Portlock completely.
So while other towns along this new highway are thriving, Portlock is left behind.
Right.
Isolated and suddenly not as valuable economically.
Exactly. The cannery and sawmill shut down.
Right.
They were the lifeblood of the town.
Right.
And people started to move. They wanted better opportunities. They wanted a life that was less precarious, less isolated.
That's like the town was a victim of progress.
Yeah.
Left behind by the very thing that was modernizing Alaska.
Right.
But you have to wonder, right? Did that fear, those stories of the Nantinaq, you know, did that play a part in everyone leaving? Did people leave just because of, you know, the economy, or were they genuinely scared?
It's possible. Imagine living in a place where you constantly felt like you were being watched, being hunted. Even if there was, a logical explanation for all the strange stuff, the effect of it all must have been too much.
It's like the fear itself became a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
Driving people away and ultimately, leading to the town's end. But let's go back to the reported deaths and disappearances.
Okay.
Some say dozens of people died, but official records, they paint a different picture.
Yeah, the official records show way fewer deaths. And there's no news about all these disappearances. It's weird, right?
So is it possible that the body count, so to speak, has been exaggerated over time? That the legend of Portlock, it's just grown,
Yeah.
feeding off the fear and uncertainty until the truth is distorted.
It wouldn't be the first time a story got more dramatic in the retelling. Or maybe there's another reason. Maybe there were darker things that people buried to protect the town, keep the rest of the world from finding out.
Okay, now we're getting into conspiracy theories.
Ah!
But it does make things even more interesting. So
Yeah.
if we were to just step back and look at Portlock, objectively, what would we see?
We'd see this isolated town trying to survive in a world that's changing.
Right.
This town dealing with isolation, a tough economy, and the harshness of the Alaskan wilderness.
Right.
We see a few deaths, a few people disappearing, probably made worse by the fear and the belief in the supernatural.
And we see this rich history, passed down for generations. That has really shaped how people see this place.
Right.
Maybe even blurring the lines between what's real and what's, just a story.
It's a lot of things, and I think that's what makes Portlock so interesting. There's no easy answer, no single thing that explains everything. It's a puzzle with missing pieces. Right.
And those gaps are filled with speculation, with whispers of the past.
It's like we're trying to solve a mystery, but we only have half the clues. But that's part of the fun, right?
Right.
Trying to piece it all together, trying to make sense of it.
I think it also shows how fascinated we are with the unknown. We're drawn to stories that challenge us, that leave us with more questions than answers.
So what do you think about those, those vivid descriptions of the Nantinaq? Are those real? Actual encounters with something we can't understand? Or are they just like products of fear, isolation, the human need to see patterns even when they're not there?
That's a question that will probably be debated forever as long as the legend of Portlock is around.
Yeah.
I think it's important to recognize the power of belief.
Yeah.
If you really believe in something, if you're looking for it, you're going to see it everywhere.
So the fear itself, it can actually change how we see things.
Right.
Affecting what we see and how we explain it. Exactly. But we can't rule out the possibility that there are things out there we just don't get. Things that don't fit with what we know.
Which brings us back to that big question. Is there a logical explanation for everything?
Right.
Or is there room for things we just can't explain?
That question has been around forever.
Yeah.
And I don't think Portlock will give us a definite answer. But I'm okay with that. Sometimes the journey, is more important than the destination.
Right.
It's the exploring, the questioning. That's where the real value is.
It's like we're on an archaeological dig, carefully brushing away layers of time, trying to find the truth underneath.
Right.
But even if we never find the whole thing, even if there are missing pieces, the searching, the piecing it together, that's what makes us understand more.
And that's what I hope people listening get from this deep dive.
Right.
It's not about getting a perfect answer. It's about looking at the mystery, looking at all the complicated parts, and understanding that sometimes the best stories are the ones that leave us with more questions than answers.
So as we're wrapping up our exploration of Portlock, Alaska,
right,
we're left with this haunting question. Did this monster drive all the people away?
Oh.
Or was there leaving more of a human story shaped by money problems, isolation, and that powerful fear? It's like, pick your ending.
Right.
Do you go with the supernatural, like this creature, this Nantinaq, or do you lean towards, more realistic explanations, the history, the money problems?
I think there's space for both. It doesn't have to be like one or the other. Maybe the truth is somewhere in the middle, you know, where the real problems of living in such a tough place meet the power of stories, the power of what people believe.
Like the land itself, the Kenai Peninsula, it's beautiful, but rugged.
Yeah.
It almost seems to breed these stories. the isolation, the vastness, it makes you feel vulnerable, you know?
Right.
Like your imagination could just go wild.
And you have to think about the culture, too. For the Alutiiq, the Nantinaq, it wasn't just a monster. It was part of how they saw the world. It represented the forces that shaped their lives.
Yeah.
And when the settlers came, they brought their own fears, their own, past experiences. And that probably shaped how they saw and interacted with this new place.
It's almost like they were ready to see the Nantinaq,
Right.
to see any strange thing as proof that it was real.
Right.
And once that fear took hold, it spread, taking over the whole town.
Fear is really powerful, especially in a place like Portlock,
Right.
where the line between being civilized and being in the wild was so thin, it can make us see things that aren't really there. It can make us interpret things to fit what we already believe.
And what's so crazy is that this fear, whether it was real or not,
Yeah.
it's stuck around even though the town is gone.
Right.
Portlock is like this place people go to see if they can find something unknown, something supernatural.
It's become this Alaskan legend, a warning about what happens when you go too far into the wilderness.
Right.
About not respecting the power of nature.
Yeah.
And in a way, it's that fear, that fascination with what we can't explain that's kept this story of Portlock alive.
It's like this ghost story that won't die.
Right.
Each time it's told, each time someone tries to figure it out,
Yeah.
it just keeps it going.
Yeah.
But there's something else about this story that I think is really cool.
Okay.
The idea that by telling these stories, by keeping this Nantinaq legend alive,
Right.
we might actually be adding to the mystery of Portlock.
That's interesting. Yeah. By telling these tales, by guessing what might have happened, are we making the myth stronger?
Right.
Are we shaping how people will see this place in the future? It's like we're mixing history and legend together, blurring the lines between what we can prove and what we can only imagine.
So the story of Portlock, it becomes like everyone's story, shaped not just by what happened, but by how we remember it,
Right.
how we explain it. It's like we're all, adding to the painting,
Yeah.
creating this picture of a place that still sticks with us.
And that's what makes this deep dive, so great. It's not about finding the one right answer. It's about being okay with not knowing everything, the unanswered questions,
Right.
the possibility that there are things in this world that we just don't understand.
It's about realizing how powerful stories are, how they shape what we're afraid of, how they shape what we're curious about. And sometimes the best mysteries are the ones that don't have clear answers.
And those unanswered questions are what make us come back, keep searching, keep pushing the limits of what we think we know.
Right.
Because there's something exciting about the unexplained.
Yeah.
About going into the unknown.
It's like we're meant to look for those mysteries.
Right.
To try to understand the world even when it doesn't make sense.
Right.
Even when it goes against everything we think we know.
And that's the beauty of a place like Portlock. It reminds us that there are still wild places out there, places that, that keep secrets, places that speak to our deepest fears and our, and what fascinates us.
So as we leave Portlock, Alaska,
Yeah.
we want you to keep exploring, keep asking questions, keep that curiosity alive.
Right.
Because the world is full of mysteries.
Right.
Waiting for us to find them.
Yeah.
Waiting to, make us think and challenge what we believe is possible.
And who knows, maybe in your exploring, you'll find a story that's just as interesting and mysterious as Portlock.
Until our next deep dive, keep those lanterns burning bright. And remember, sometimes the best answers are the ones we find ourselves.